the 40-year tension between my family and the CIA.
The Kennedy feud with the CIA was multi-generational. The family patriarch Joseph Kennedy sat on a commission that called for an end to the CIA's parliamentary operations, and his sons John and Robert Kennedy both railed against the CIA's role in Vietnam.
And actually, my father, a week before he was killed, that the first thing he was going to do was to remove the clandestine services from the CIA and make the CIA what it was supposed to be, which was an intelligence gathering organization.
It's almost if you have set up and detailed an enemies list for those who may have had it in for your family.
There was a lot of enemies that my father made, and they weren't all CIA.
Is that where the seeds of doubt were planted, that perhaps your father wasn't killed by the person we say he was killed by?
I never suspected at any level that anybody other than Sirhan had killed my father until maybe 3 years ago.
What changed?
Well, Paul Schrade.
Paul Schrade was a close friend of Robert Kennedy and was with the candidate the night he was shot. It was Schrade who took Sirhan's first bullet, and it is Schrade who has insisted for decades that Sirhan could not have acted alone. He's now raised serious questions in Robert Kennedy Jr.'s mind as well.
Anybody who reads the autopsy report is, it's hard to believe that Sirhan shot my dad, that his bullets hit my dad, because Sirhan was always in front of my father. And yet all shots, all the 4 shots that hit my father came from behind him.
That leads you to conclude what?
Well, I don't have any conclusion. You know, I mean, and my opinion is really irrelevant. What's important is what the facts say, what the autopsy says, what the ballistic evidence, and what the eyewitnesses said.
Do you believe that the CIA or another government agency was in any way involved in the assassination of your uncle?
Well, I don't know. I don't think that that possibility has been eliminated. A lot of people don't understand that when John Kennedy was killed, my father really was Attorney General. And so one of the defenses of the Warren Commission was, well, Bobby Kennedy was the best investigator of that era. He was like Mueller of that era. You know, he had been for 10 years, he'd been investigating the unions and the Teamsters and,
yes,
and the mob. And so why wouldn't he investigate it? But the truth is, the day that his brother was killed, he lost all of the investigative capacity at the Department of Justice. He had 30,000 FBI agents who worked for him, but he never talked to J. Edgar Hoover again, not a single time after my Uncle Jack was killed. Oh, he really had no, you know, because Hoover at that time began reporting directly to Johnson. And my father, who was ostensibly Hoover's boss, really lost control of the FBI and the investigative capacity of the Department of Justice, and he resigned soon afterward.
I just find the whole thing remarkable that the Attorney General of the United States, later a U.S. Senator, a person in a position to have a lot of information, would suspect his own CIA, and now the documents are still being withheld by that same agency. I think it's really fascinating.
Now, new evidence is casting doubt for some on Sirhan's guilt. According to that evidence, Sirhan was standing in front of Kennedy at the time of the shooting, but an autopsy report found that Kennedy was shot at point-blank range from behind. It reportedly shows as many as 13 shots were fired that night, but Sirhan's gun only held 8 bullets. That's one reason why Kennedy's eldest son, Robert Kennedy Jr., visited Sirhan in prison. He tells the Washington Post, "There were too many bullets. You can't fire 13 shots out of an 8-shot gun."
All of a sudden, I started shaking and fell.
Paul Schrade, a labor leader who campaigned for the former Attorney General, also was hit by gunfire. He's believed for decades that the evidence supports a second gunman.
The prosecution's own evidence that Sirhan did fire 2 shots, missed Kennedy, and shot me.
I want to know what moved Robert Kennedy Jr. to visit Sirhan. I could imagine that you had something to do with that.
Well, we've been talking about this a long time. I've talked to other members of the family. One day, right here in this living room, he brought 3 of his youngest kids, and he said, look, Paul, you were there that night. They don't know what happened to their grandfather. Would you please tell them?
Now, the evidence that convicted Sirhan was pretty compelling. You had the confession. You also had eyewitness testimony. You also had that smoking gun, the weapon. And we should also point out that Robert Kennedy Jr. wants this investigation reopened.
It's fascinating so many years later and still so many questions left unanswered. Michelle, thank you.